This is part 2 of our lesson on solving equations by isolating the variable. So in this section, we're going to go through some trig equations, but there is a little note that I've added to the side here. So sine, cos, and tan, and their reciprocals, cosecant, secant, and cotan, are periodic, which means they repeat. They have a repeating pattern, and if you were to look at their graphs, they would just repeat themselves over and over and over again. So when you solve a trig equation, they actually have multiple answers, but for today, we are learning the first step in solving trig equations. We are just going to focus on how to rearrange and solve. We are not going to worry about the fact that there are multiple solutions. We're going to save that for when we do our unit on trig equations. So we're going to start with 4 sine x minus 1 equals 2. So I want to rearrange to get the x by itself. And I do notice there is only one x to solve for, so I can just start taking things to the other side using inverse operations. So I would start by adding 1 to both sides. And I'm going to get 4 sine x equals 2 plus 1, which is 3. All right, then I'm going to, oh, I lost the x. Sorry about that. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And I get that sine x equals 3 over 4. Now I have a decision to make. 3 divided by 4 is 0.75. So 3 divided by 4 is 0.75. That is what we would consider an exact decimal. It does not need to be rounded. So we could write 0.75, or we could leave it as 3 over 4. I feel like I want to make it 0.75, but you're welcome to leave it as 3 over 4. Now, to get x by itself, I need to get rid of the sign or move the sign to the other side using its inverse operation. The inverse of a sine is the inverse sine, and I'm going to do it to both sides. So we're going to do that x equals the inverse sine of 0.75. Now, first thing you want to do is make sure that your calculator is in radians, which mine, of course, is not. It never seems to be. So I switched mine using mode 5. So from here, I have choices. If you see what you type in on the screen, right, when you see sine, cos, and tan show up, you would do shift and then sine bracket 0.75 close bracket equals. I have to do it the other way around. I have to put in the 0.75 and then shift and sine. And I get approximately 0.8. Now that is 84. The next digit is an 8, so that would push that up to 0.85. So x is approximately 0.85. Now when I'm solving for x, we are trying to find the angle that we took sine of. So this actually would be in radians because we are solving for the angle. And there's my final answer. Okay, we are going to try another one. So this one is a reciprocal function. So I have 3 cotan x plus 1 equals 0. I am going to try to solve for x. I do notice there is just one x in the question, so I don't need to collect like terms or anything like that. I can just start rearranging. So I would start by moving any addition or subtraction. So that means I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, and I will get 3 cotan x equals -1. And then I would divide both sides by 3 to get -1 over 3. So cotan x equals -1 over 3. Now 1 divided by 3, or sorry, -1 divided by 3 is not a very nice number. I don't want to have to round that. I do not want to have to write the whole thing down. You could write -0.3 and then repeating by putting the line over top of it if you really wanted to. I'm just going to leave it as -1/3. Now, my next step would be to do the inverse cotan, but I do not have buttons on my calculator for cotan. I have sine, I have cos, I have tan, that's it. So I know that cotan is the reciprocal of tan. So that means cotan x is really the same as 1 over tan x, and that equals negative 1 over 3. And then I am going to cross multiply to get that tan out of its denominator here. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 1 and tan x times negative 1. I'm going to put the negative with my numerator. So 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 1 times tan x is negative tan x. Now I don't want negative tan x, I want just tan x. So I am going to divide both sides by negative 1 because there's a secret little negative 1 in front there. And that will give me negative 3 equals tan x. And then from here, I can do the inverse tan of negative 3 to solve for x. Now, before I do that, I do just want to point out, I started with cotan x equals negative 1/3, and I ended up with tan x equals negative 3. So the reciprocal of cotan is tan, and the reciprocal of negative 1 over 3 would be negative 3 over 1, which is just negative 3. So you can actually do a shortcut here where you just flip the cotan to say tan, and you flip the fraction to say negative, to say whatever the reciprocal of that is. And then it saves you having to do all of those cross multiplying steps. It's up to you, but you can do that if you want to. So I am going to calculate this. So the inverse tan of negative 3. So on my calculator, I have to put the negative 3 in first, and then shift tan, and I get approximately negative 1.2. That is a 4, but the next number is a 9, so that would be negative 1.25. And it is an angle, so that is radians, which equals my x. If you forgot to write the radians, it's not the end of the world, but we're going to try to make the effort. Okay, so there is one more question, and I would like you to try it on your own. So I would recommend that you pause the video, try the question, and then you can check with my answer in a second. So pause the video, try it yourself, and then I'll go through how I would do the question. Okay, so secant x minus 3 equals 1. I would start by adding 3 to both sides. So I would get secant x equals 1 plus 3, which is 4. Now I did say there was a shortcut here that you could use where I would say the reciprocal of secant is cosine. So instead of saying this is 1 over cosine and cross multiplying, I can say the reciprocal of secant is cosine, and the reciprocal of 4, this is secretly 4 over 1, would be 1 over 4. It's just a little shortcut where you flip both sides, right? And then now it's written in cosine. So I'm going to do the inverse cosine of 1 over 4, and then use my calculator to do that. I could have written that was 0.25, but for some reason I didn't. All right, so I'm going to do bracket 1 divided by 4. I got 0.25, and then inverse cos, and I get that x is approximately 0. Now that's 25. The next one's a 2, so that's going to stay, oh, sorry, you can't see that. That's going to stay 0.25. And that is an angle, so that is in radians. Now, they're not all angles. It's just for sine, cos, and tan. The thing that comes after it, the argument, is always an angle. Okay, well, you can join me in the next video to learn how to solve and rearrange a log equation.